A wife, constantly underestimated by her husband, listens in silence as he brags to friends that he could do better. What he doesn't know is that she's secretly built a multi-million empire behind the scenes. When his arrogance reaches a breaking point, she steps into his luxury world, not to fight, but to redefine it. Her reveal doesn't just break his ego. It shatters the entire image he built for himself. I still remember the moment he said it, not loudly, not dramatically, but casually, as if my entire existence was a negotiable detail in his luxury life. As if better was something he truly believed he deserved. We were standing in the grand foyer of a friend's mansion, the type of place he loved pretending he belonged to, not because he earned it, but because he needed an audience. He was surrounded by his usual circle, men who measured success by the shine of their shoes and the size of their watch faces. Women who whispered judgments behind manicured smiles. And in the middle of them, my husband stood with his glass raised, telling a story that wasn't funny, but his delivery was confident enough that everyone pretended it was. "She's fine," he said, when someone complimented me for something I didn't even hear. "But honestly, I think I could do better. You know, someone who actually fits this lifestyle." A few chuckles, a few glances, and then silence. Not because of what he said, but because I was right behind him. He froze for a split second when he realized I heard. But embarrassment never reached him. Ego absorbed everything. He recovered with a shrug, a practiced smirk, and a careless, "Oh, she knows I'm joking." But I knew he wasn't. He had said variations of that line many times, quietly, indirectly, in ways that sliced deeper each time. I didn't say a word. I just turned, walked toward the balcony, and let the cold night air cool the heat rising inside me. Not anger. Not humiliation. Something sharper. Something cleaner. Something that didn't shake my voice or tighten my chest. Something like truth. He never knew me. Not really. Not the way a man knows the woman he loves. He knew the version he built, a shadow he controlled, a mold he approved, a presence he tolerated when it made him look good. But the real me? The one who had spent years building something silently, patiently, strategically? That version was invisible to him. And that was his first mistake. Hours later, after the event faded into music and meaningless laughter, he came up to me with that same smirk. The smirk he always wore when he thought I was overreacting. "You know, you really shouldn't take things so seriously," he said. No apology. No awareness. No shame. Just a man confident that I, like always, would swallow everything in silence. But the silence he expected had already broken inside me. The next morning, I woke before him. The house felt different. Not because it changed overnight, but because I did. I walked through each room, noticing the small things he valued more than he valued me. His imported sculptures. His limited edition books. His designer shoes perfectly aligned, as if they deserved reverence. He spent years curating a lifestyle he couldn't afford alone. He wanted the luxury world to see him as chosen, special, superior. And yet, the only reason he could stand in those rooms, attend those events, wear those clothes was because of me. Not the version he knew. Not the wife he dismissed. But the woman he never imagined existed. The woman who owned the silent empire. The truth is, while he spent years believing he could do better, I spent years building something he never cared enough to ask about. While he chased admiration, I was creating value. While he was busy impressing people who didn't matter, I was signing deals with people who moved markets. He thought he married a quiet, ordinary woman with modest ambitions. He never realized he married the founder of a multi-million brand that operated under a name he didn't even recognize. I used his ignorance as insulation. I used my silence as strategy. And I used every dismissive comment as motivation. But that night, when he jokingly reduced me to a placeholder in his fantasy life, that was the moment I decided he didn't deserve my silence anymore. A week later, we were invited to another high-end gathering. A charity auction held at a private estate, glittering with chandeliers, and people who loved pretending kindness was a currency. He insisted I attend, not because he wanted me there, but because appearances mattered to him more than relationships. He wanted to stand beside a polished accessory. He never expected the accessory to outshine the entire event. I wore something simple,
Clean.
elegant. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because confidence doesn't need sparkle to be noticed. When we entered, he did what he always did, drifted away to perform for people who fed his ego. I let him. Tonight wasn't about him watching me. Tonight was about everyone else finally seeing the truth. Half an hour in, the host made an announcement. A new corporate sponsor had joined the charity, someone who had donated more in a single move than all the top patrons combined. The room buzzed. Whispers spread like electricity. Everyone wanted to know who it was. The host invited the sponsor forward. My husband straightened his jacket, already smiling as if he were the chosen one. He even stepped forward slightly, ready to make an entrance. But the lights turned, not toward him. They turned to me. A soft gasp went across the room. Clusters of people turned. Some disbelieving.
Some stunned.
Some curious. My husband's smile evaporated. And in that silence, I walked to the stage, not rushed, not proud, just steady. The kind of steadiness that comes from knowing exactly who you are and exactly what you built. When I reached the microphone, I spoke with the calmness of a woman who no longer needed to prove anything. I believe in supporting people, I said simply. Especially those who have been told they don't belong. Not a dramatic line. Not a revenge speech. Just truth delivered with precision. The audience understood. My husband understood. Everyone understood. His fantasy shattered. Not loudly. Not violently. But with elegance. He wasn't the center of this world anymore. He never was. He just didn't know who the real center had been all along. And this was only the beginning. He didn't move at first. He just stood there in the crowd, frozen in a way I had never seen before. Not the confident freeze of a man posing for attention, but the stillness of someone whose entire reflection had cracked in front of the world. As I stepped down from the stage, people approached me with warm smiles, handshakes, and soft admiration. Compliments flowed in gentle waves, the kind of genuine respect he always chased but never truly earned. I thanked each person with calm precision, not needing to exaggerate anything. Power doesn't raise its voice. It settles in the room like quiet gravity. He watched all of it, not because he cared about charity, not because he understood what I had built, but because for the first time in his life, he had no idea who I was. I could see the questions swirling in his mind. When, how, why, how much? Questions he never bothered to ask when he assumed he already knew everything worth knowing. Eventually, when the crowd thinned around me, he walked forward. His steps weren't confident now. They were hesitant, almost unfamiliar, as if the ground beneath him shifted with every movement. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, trying to sound composed. I looked at him, really looked at him, this man who thought he could do better. This man who built his identity on borrowed luxury and borrowed confidence. This man who treated me like a silent shadow in his life. "You never asked," I replied softly. He exhaled, but it wasn't relief. It was the sound of a realization settling like weight on his chest. "But all this? The brand, the sponsorship, the donations. It's all you." "Yes," I said. "It always was." He stepped back slightly, as if needing distance from the truth. "You mean while I was trying to build us a future, you already had one?" That line almost made me smile. He never built anything. Not really. He built an image, an illusion, a performance for people who never cared. "You weren't building a future," I said. "You were building an audience." His jaw tightened. "I just wanted us to fit in." "No," I corrected. "You wanted to fit in. You just expected me to stand beside you while you did." The music behind us shifted into something slow and elegant, but the tension wrapped around us like a separate melody. People gave us space, not to be polite, but because they sensed a scene unfolding. Not dramatic, not loud, just powerful enough to draw attention. He lowered his voice. "Is this why you've been distant? Is this why you never argued back? Why you avoided my friends?" "Avoided?"
No.
I simply refused to shrink myself to make him feel tall. I avoided people who made you feel superior, I said. Not because I was intimidated, but because I was busy building something real. His shoulders slumped, not out of defeat, but out of fear. Fear of losing the version of me he had taken for granted. Fear of facing a truth bigger than his ego. So that means you're not the person I thought you were. This time, I did smile.
No, I'm not.
He swallowed hard. His eyes scanned my face, searching for softness, for familiarity, for the comforting version of me he had always relied on. But tonight, he was meeting me for the first time. I didn't know, he whispered. I know, I replied. That's the problem. He hesitated before speaking again. But why keep something so big from your own husband? I took a slow breath. The kind you take when you're ready to set down something heavy you've carried for too long. Because you wanted a partner who fit into your world, I said. I needed a partner who could stand beside mine. His expression shifted, confusion first, then regret, then something darker. Something close to panic. Not because of the money. Money was never the point. It was the loss of control, the collapse of an illusion he built around us. What now? He asked, voice unsteady.
What now?
A simple question with a complicated answer. I'm not here to punish you, I said. I'm not here to embarrass you. But I'm done standing in the corners of your gatherings so you can feel important. I'm done being the woman you think you could do better than. His eyes glistened, not with tears, but with humiliation wrapped in guilt. A type of realization men like him rarely experience. I want to fix this, he said quietly. The sincerity in his tone didn't change the truth. He wanted to fix it because he finally understood what he stood to lose. You can change, I replied. But the version of me you ignored doesn't exist anymore. You don't get that woman back. The silence that followed was heavy, shaped by years of imbalance finally exposed. And just when he was about to speak again, an older woman approached us. Graceful, influential, someone everyone in the room seemed to respect. She placed a gentle hand on my arm. You were extraordinary tonight, she said warmly. Your contribution will change the entire direction of this charity. I would love to discuss a long-term partnership. I nodded, offering a genuine smile. Of course. I'd be happy to. The woman turned to my husband next, but the look she gave him wasn't admiration. It was the polite, distant acknowledgement people reserve for those who suddenly feel very small. When she walked away, he looked at me again, but this time he didn't speak. He didn't need to. Everything was already said, without words. He finally understood the magnitude of the gap between who he thought he was and who I actually became. The rest of the event passed in a blur of conversations, connections, and respect. People approached me not for gossip, not for curiosity, but for opportunity. They saw leadership where he only saw limitation. They saw strength where he only saw silence. When we finally stepped outside, the cold air brushed against my skin like a quiet reminder of transformation. The world looked different, not because it changed, but because I stepped into it with clarity. He walked beside me, not ahead. Not pulling me. Not leading. Just trying to keep up. His voice, when it came, was soft. Broken in a way that felt unfamiliar. You really never needed me, he said. I looked ahead, not at him. I wanted a partner, I replied. Not permission. He didn't answer. He just absorbed the words, knowing they were the final piece of truth he had avoided for too long. And as we reached the car, something inside me settled. Calm, steady, undeniable. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't payback. This was revelation. A reveal that didn't just shatter his luxury fantasy. It exposed who truly belonged in that world.
And who never did.